Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason, and I would like to thank all of you for helping me reach 1,000 subscribers. Now, I have been thinking what to do. So, rather than do one particular myth, let's look at a myriad of smaller ones. First up is the reason my channel will never be safe for children. Have you ever wondered where the idea of bathing in virgin blood comes from? A large chunk of it comes from Elizabeth Bathory, a noblewoman from Hungary. From 1602 to 1611, there were rumors spreading of her deeds. These rumors started around the time her husband fell ill, becoming disabled, and died in 1604. Peasant girls were taken from their homes, where the noble woman was to educate them. Instead, she tortured them, mutilated them, and extensive abuse. And the folklore and local rumors even go so far as her bathing in the blood of her victims. Their bodies were discarded, buried unceremoniously, and with the family unknowing. In time, she was arrested and had over 300 supposed witnesses, with an estimated 650 victims. Yet, there is a question whether it was political slander. Regardless, the accusations were so extensive that she was to be executed, except due to her high status and a stigma about spilling noble blood. Oh, and a massive debt to the Bathory family was cancelled as part of the deal. She was instead placed under house arrest, where she died in 1614. But her story doesn't exactly end there. She became the basis for the lesbian vampire known as Carmilla. We have all heard of the knight in shining armor coming to save the day, sometimes also called Prince Charming. Well, who was he? The legendary hero, Sigurd or Siegfried. And he isn't such a shining example. He has achieved many victories against foes like the dragon Fafnir, and was blessed with a nearly invincible body by bathing in dragon's blood. In time, he would seek the hand of Kriemhild, but to do so, he had to help Gunther marry Brunhild. And she was a horrible person. Anyone who sought her hand was required to complete impossible challenges, and if they failed, the suitor was killed. While Sigurd had a cloak of invisibility. Yeah, there is actually tons of those in mythology. Using it, our original knight in shining armor helped his friend cheat and win the queen's hand. But she wasn't done. On Gunther and Brunhild's wedding night, she took her husband, tied him up, and hung him from the ceiling. Are you seeing a pattern with her? Well, Gunther went and asked his friend's help again. On the second night of their wedding, Sigurd snuck in, tied up, beat, and threatened Brunhild in secret before Gunther was finally able to consummate the wedding. Brunhild's cooperation was questionable here. Oh, and Sigurd stole the queen's belt and ring to give to Kriemhild. After all of that, Sigurd was finally able to marry Kriemhild. But in time, Kriemhild and Brunhild would speak, and they would get into an argument. It got so heated that they came to blows, and Kriemhild leaves and returns with the belt and ring of Brunhild and tells the truth about what happened. Pissed off, Brunhild then plots the assassination of Sigurd. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Tell me, does the story of the Sleeping Beauty and Snow White seem similar? Both have a princess who is put to sleep. Both have our Prince Charming who awakens them, And there is a reason for the similarities. They both originate from the same myth. Brynhildr was the name of a Valkyrie. Normally, they are told whose souls to collect from battle, but Brynhildr spared a young man, and instead took the life of an old soldier, and this angered Odin. Brynhildr was then put to sleep behind a ring of fire. Our knight in shiny armor, Sigurd, they came and awoke her, and the two fall in love. But depending on the versions, the two are separated, and in many, Sigurd loses his memories. Oh, it gets complicated when some translations link Brynhildr as Brunhild. Yeah, the full story is complicated, with lots of twists and turns. So, Prince Charming is the knight in shining armor. The first place many of you have heard of Fiddler's Green is probably from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. It is a form of afterlife for sailors after they have spent 50 years of service. It is a lush green land, and a fiddler is always playing, never stopping, not even at night or to eat, hence the name. You would dance there all day and all night, a place of laughter and fun. But to find it, it wasn't easy. A sailor was to take an oar and start walking inland, and to continue walking until someone asks you what you are carrying. Now, that doesn't really work, since most people, even in the oldest of times, knew what an oar was, thus impossible to achieve. Now, can you tell me the name of the sword in the stone? It isn't Excalibur, but Caliburn is different. Originally, it belonged to King Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, and was placed in the stone by Merlin. In most accounts, this was the Sword of Selection, which King Arthur drew on Christmas morning. But in time, that sword would break. Then Vivian, also known as the Lady of the Lake, would give Arthur Excalibur, a sword which granted magical powers to him. Upon Arthur's death, Sir Bedivere, or Sir Griflet, returned the sword to the Lady of the Lake, who waves it 3 times, and the sword is never seen again. But I am positive that some of you have heard that it is Excalibur that was in the stone. And here is the thing with the legend of King Arthur. It was put into written accounts over centuries. King Arthur was supposed to have lived in the 5th and 6th century, but the writings about him date back to the 10th to the 15th centuries, with some uncertainties. The idea that Excalibur and Caliburn are the same sword comes from Le Morte d'Arthur, where it was Excalibur in the stone, but earlier writings divided them in 2. Yeah, I'm sure that has confused a few people. Even the historical texts are confused. They also change how the sword got into the stone. Okay, technically, it is an anvil on top of a stone. And now for a real mess. Have any of you ever watched the old Rankin and Bass movies? Like Santa Claus is coming to town, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So, tell me, what are the little bearded fellows with pointed ears we see? Are they elves or dwarves? Well, they both come from Norse mythology, and are more similar. Dwarves call Svartalfheim their home. Oh, and it happens to translate as roughly home of the dark elves, thus bringing the idea that dwarves are the dark elves. Now, these dwarves or dark elves were skilled smiths that made many things like Thor's hammer Mjolnir or Gleipnir, the ribbon which bound Fenrir. As for the more traditional elves, they are often considered part of the Vanir, which some consider akin to the gods. also called Asir. Note, the god Freyr was said to be part of the Vanir. Now Freyr and the Vanir lived in Alfheim, or home of the elves. Now, if you look at Alfheim and Svart Alfheim, they share most of the word. Only the Svart part doesn't match, and guess what it means? Yep, black. So, black elves. Now, the original texts don't go into detail about the beards, but the idea of dwarves with beards is a bit more complicated. The 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarves had 6 of the 7 dwarves with beards. Only Dopey didn't. In addition, we see confusion between dwarves and elf in all legends. In the old German legend of the silver pine cones, the mother meets a creature in the forest who offers her help. Depending on the source, it will use either Zwerg for dwarf or Ilf for elf. Truth is, it seems the full separation between dwarves being short folk and elves being more tied with nature is the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. Yeah, you'd be surprised how much of fantasy settings comes from him alone. Though, I must ask, would a dwarf-elf hybrid be the closest to the original concept? I should write that sort of character. Since we mentioned Tolkien, let's go over some of the myths which inspired the tales of Middle-earth, namely the One Ring. There is some disagreement, but it does seem to call back to the tale of the Otter Ransom. Odin, Loki, and a god named Honir were walking along a river when they came across an otter basking in the sun, holding a salmon. Loki picked up a stone and threw it, killing the otter from a distance. The 3 of them collected the prize and continued on their trip, but night was falling and they found a house. A farmer and magician named Hrodmar lived there with his sons, one of which was named Fafnir and the other Regan. When they saw the otter, the farmer and his sons pounced and trapped the gods. You see, the otter was the son of the farmer. Things get tense, but an agreement was made. The gods would repay the death of the son by covering his body in gold, inside and out. Loki is sent out to do this. And you know Loki by now, right? He takes his sweet old time. In time, he captures the dwarf, Andvari. Loki demanded all the gold from this dwarf, but he hid a small gold ring in his hand, and Loki wasn't about to be tricked a second time. He demanded the ring, and the dwarf rejected it. Loki ended up taking it by force, but the dwarf spoke a curse over it, and Loki didn't care. You see, this ring was on Varanat, and the owner could use it to find gold. Loki took the dwarf's gold back to the family, except for the magic ring, which he held on to. He covered Otter's pelt inside and out, except for one little spot. Try as he might, Loki just couldn't cover one little spot. Finally, after a scolding from Odin, he placed the ring onto Otter and covered the final hair. The other gods were free to leave, but our tale doesn't end there. Remember how I said one son was named Fafnir? Doesn't that name sound familiar? Well, it should. Fafnir would be consumed by greed for all the gold and murdered his family, and the curse caused him to turn into a dragon, the same one which Sigurd was to later slay, and he would pass the cursed ring on to Brunhild. I'm sure you can see the ties back to Tolkien's works. The last one to look at comes from Disney's Hercules movie. Oh, there is a lot wrong with that, like Hera being a decent mother, or Zeus being loyal. A few fun little quick myths to touch on. If you have any others you want me to look into, let me know down below. Thank you for watching, adventurers, and thank you for lending me your attention. This has been a fun project, and it is growing much faster than I expected. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to get a dozen views in total. Until next time, I'll see you on the roads.